Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on the Western Canada RPA user group. We've got an exciting opportunity to listen in and learn a few new tricks from Brady Cusack. Brady's got a really interesting background in cybersecurity, a little bit of blockchain, and super excited to have him on the meetup. So thanks so much, Brady, for joining us.
Hey, thank you for
I'll
having me. Excited to be here.
Wonderful. I'll let you take the reins and share your screen if you want to.
Thank you everybody for joining. And again, thank you, Jesse. This presentation that I'm going to give, it should hopefully only be 45 minutes, and I'll do some questions afterwards that any of you may have. But the focus that I want to target is ways that Blue Prism and RPA in general can be leveraged for cybersecurity use cases. So internally at Blue Prism, we are exploring the creation of different frameworks and solutions that we currently actually have up on Partner Digital Exchange that we want to introduce to the larger customer base that we support, just to show ways that using robotics process automation, you can't replace all of those security tools that your organization is using today, but you can make them a heck of a lot more efficient by using RPA. So just to get started, I have a couple of slides, but I won't spend too much time going through the different slide decks. So some of the benefits of robotics process automation in cybersecurity is one of the key ones is that it's very quick to deploy. So rather than needing to go in and get either a massive service now implementation, a massive API team building out different services and things like that, with RPA, you can have direct integrations with any of those security platforms that your organization is using today. So whether it be like a Komodo endpoint security solution, CrowdStrike, any of those major providers that most organizations are probably familiar with, Blue Prism can interact directly with those solutions, leveraging RPA through API calls and user interface interactions, and just perform a lot of those tasks that typically a security engineer would be stuck doing and spending hours doing themselves on a computer. It's also a very good tool for aggregation of logs. So in traditional older solutions and older systems that are out there today, the logs aren't always accessible by tools like Splunk or tools like Kibana or any of the major tools that are leveraged by teams today to go through and look at things like access logs, things like error logs, and so on that your applications may have. But leveraging RPA for those specific use cases as well, Blue Prism and RPA in general can just reach out to all of those different legacy systems, pull in all of those reports that typically a security engineer or somebody would have to go in and spend hours doing, and it's painstaking work. And Blue Prism will be able to bring all of that data in and actually go through it and apply different rules to say, hey, this is something that should be flagged, or hey, this is something that we need to create a ticket for. It's also able to be leveraged for triggering remediations that are identified by different endpoint security or any security solutions that you have maintain your cloud environment. Say, for example, that you have a cluster of web servers that are working together to deploy some larger applications, but one of those web servers or one of those clusters has a bunch of vulnerabilities on it that were just identified, and you need to isolate it. Rather than having an engineer go in there, isolate it, and manually go through and do all of that tasks, you can have that immediate solution of Blue Prism or RP in general just being triggered and immediately isolating it so that it doesn't expose the rest of your infrastructure to any risks that may have shown up with that exploit. It's also good for non-traditional things. So a lot of organizations have their own specific applications that they use. They have their own specific security policies that they have to abide by, depending on what industry you're in. And so there's some instances where there's just not a lot of there's not a lot of capability that you can get from existing tools. So you'll have to get maybe 1, 2, 3 different security solutions. And if any of you have purchased cybersecurity software, it is very expensive compared to other technologies. A lot of these things you can just, Blue Prism, RPA, go in and manually do it and feed it to those other security tools that you have and manipulate it in a way that you can use your existing digital workers that your organization has and solve that problem without needing to purchase a bunch of extra tools. And then again, it's just a lot cheaper than most technology security platforms. Cybersecurity tools are very expensive and RPA is much, much cheaper. So some of the use cases that we're really targeting for this first kind of set of assets that we're putting out on our digital exchange are centered around things like vulnerability management, network detection and response, log analysis, simulated cyber attacks. So things like internal campaigns that your IT team would be doing to go in and try to trick all of your employee base. We can create with RPA much more robust and honestly a lot trickier to catch phishing simulations that can really target specific user bases within your organization that are very vulnerable to this type of stuff. And it can help you get a lot of them trained in that mindset of, okay, I need to check all of these different things. And I'll get to show you a bit of that also later today in this call. And then more simple things too, password resets. Somebody's locked out of their accounts. Not every solution is going to have integration with every major identity provider. The OneLogin, Azure AD, they can only support so many applications. But if you have your old legacy systems and stuff like that, where traditionally you need to have somebody manually go in and reset your access to those systems, rather than doing that, RPA itself can just be triggered once a ticket is created in whatever ticketing system you're using. And RPA can go in and just directly solve that problem for you, directly do those password resets and get it set up for the end users. And then again, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is, again, that subnet isolation in partnership with other enterprise solutions that your organization has, just because that's always a big area where if they get in one place, they can spread out to the rest of your technology infrastructure if it's not isolated quick enough. So that's one of the other use cases that RPA can really play a big part in. So a little bit about what we have so far up on our digital exchange right now. So currently it's only in the partner digital exchange, but we hope to make it available to customers in the near future. We have a base version of a security management automation framework that we're implementing, which is not there to replace what you're doing, but to give you a template that you can actually use to work with your cybersecurity team or your sysadmin, to the point that you can sit with them in a conference room for maybe 4 or 5 hours and create maybe 1 or 2 different use cases, 1 or 2 different complex reports, 1 or 2 different, complex functions that need to be updated through something like SCCM or any of those PowerShell modules that you could have on your enterprise architecture for managing assets. And so this framework comes with sample templates to help our customers get started off with those use cases. And then we also have an example process. So it's going to actually be leveraging some of those case studies or some of those use cases that we talked about earlier. And it's going to go in and it's going to simulate doing vulnerability management detection. So it's going to go into each of the different assets or each of the different machines that are connected to your Active Directory user group. And then it's going to pull in a list of devices. It's going to query a third-party tool that actually keeps track of all of those CVEs that are open for software. If any of you are familiar with what CVEs are, they're basically just vulnerabilities. Every time a vulnerability was detected in some type of software, it gets posted online by the vendor so that all of the customers can go in and see where they're exposed. And so this sample process is just taking advantage of all of these resources that are already available on things like NIST, MITRE, and all of these different websites that they have all of them stored. And it's going to pull in those CVEs and make sure that none of your devices are exposed. So before I move on, I know I covered a lot pretty quickly. Are there any questions that anybody has before I move on?
Here, the CDEs actually list the mitigation as well, which is actually the important piece because that it's actually actionable.
Exactly. And yeah, one of the things that in the demo I'm going to show today actually is how the CVEs that are pulled in, Blue Prism goes in, it does things like creating support tickets for it. So this video is just using a sample one that an open source support system, ticketing system, but on our digital exchange, we also have freely available assets that can connect you to things like ServiceNow, Salesforce, and a lot of these different third-party tools that are already leveraged by organizations for like ticket management and stuff like that. So for the framework and the example processes that we have listed today, so those will require a domain read account in your Active Directory. So not a full domain admin for like the reporting and reading item, but for one that goes in and does the reports and pulls all of the listed software and stuff like that, it'll have to have the permissions to read all of the users in a specific operational unit. And in this automation too, there's parameters that you can adjust for different groups. And then if you're using any of the functions, and so those ones aren't in the sample that I'm going to show today, but those would need similar permissions to what your help desk users would have. And so those can be managed through the Blue Prism Credential Manager is the vertical that we're using for that right now, where you just put in the credentials for whatever account would have access to go in and do like a force through policy update or pull a security policy for a specific device. Those would be the specific policies that they would need. And so we also have a user guide and some documentation up on the digital exchange that has the different permissions itemized as well that I can share with everyone. As I talked about with the sample automation, we have a list of deliverables that are included in the sample object that comes. So we have various reports listed, such as retrieve a list of assets that are in a Active Directory, retrieve the list of software that are installed in a device, get all of the users that have been actively maintained using a device over a period of time. Things like checking Windows update history just to make sure people have been going in and running updates and not pressing that no button, because I know a lot of people like to hit the no, don't update. And also retrieving things like the device security policy. We also have a template that is basically the baseline for all of those reports above. That template is able to be used by your RPH team in partnership with a systems administrator or anybody on your info security team to build out additional reports as well. So that way you're not trapped with the ones that we provide. You can go in and extend it as you need. We also have a bunch of different functions that we're including out of the box, such as basic things like forcing group policy update, checking device uptimes. A lot of times people have issues with their computer and it's because they haven't turned it off in 17 years. So that's just one of the like basic features that we wanted to include inside of it. Things like forcing device reboots for those people who haven't turned it off, forcing Windows updates to just go through, scheduling defragments for the drives on that device, and then also an additional template. So we know these are just very basic, low-level functions and reports that you're able to go in but with that template, as you have different business needs for your organization, you can use those templates to expand upon that a lot further.
Yeah, I presume that you're using the standard kind of Microsoft offerings, such as WMIC and the PowerShell commands and things like that. So you can take the exact same code and customize it based on your specific business requirements. PowerShell is also or WMIC as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's actually a combination of both of those that we're using with this. A lot of these templates it's calling in a specific code stage that has some custom code that we built out that is working with PowerShell directly on that machine. And then also if it needs to have like admin credentials or something like that for specific devices or specific user groups, we also accept different credentials from the Blue Prism Credential Manager. That way you can authenticate the different commands that the digital worker wants to run, but using credentials for a specific area within your organization or for specific tasks that you'd be performing.
Great.
And so this is the version 1. So we're working to expand and add additional capabilities to this. Some of the additional features that we do have in the process of putting up for the version 2 in the June, July period is actually leveraging a Windows subsystem for Linux, which you're going to see today, and actually taking some of these open source tools that come with an operating system called Kali Linux that enable you to go in and actually do pen testing and do different reports, different scans and stuff like that as well in the machine. For those specific use cases, though, you'll probably need a very specific isolated environment. I made the mistake myself of putting it on my laptop and had it remote wiped more than one time. But yeah, so those are some of the things that we have in the pipeline that we're working on and that we want to expand this out to. And then, of course, as different customers, partners come back with feedback, ideas, and things that you would like to add in, we're just going to keep adding things and hopefully build a much larger repository over the next couple of years of assets that can support your organization. So now what I'm going to do is just move into two demos that I have built out. So I'm going to show a recording because again, if I run it locally, FireEye will lock me out. So I'm going to show one focused around vulnerability management that I mentioned earlier. And so that one is going to just go in, it's going to retrieve the list of devices. So using one of those default functions that comes included with our templates, it's going to retrieve the list of devices for a specific operational unit within a Active Directory. It's going to create a queue item for each of those devices. And so for each device, it's going to go in, pull a report of the software. And for all of the software that it has, it's just going to just do a quick query for a third-party API tool. So in this example, I'm using OpenCVE. It's an open source project that syncs all of their CVEs with MITRE and NIST databases for CVEs. And then once it pulls all those down, if it identifies any CVE, which I have a couple in this demo that are just installed vulnerable software for that reason, that it's going to identify the CVEs and it's going to go and create a basic support ticket. And then it's just going to keep all those metrics in a simple report as well at the end. The second demo that I'm going to walk, this one is probably my favorite one to show, is simulating internal phishing attacks. So say that you have to go in and again, make sure all of your end users are trained and educated in how to identify phishing attacks that could hackers potentially use to take over access to tons of different applications that you have. This is one of those solutions that is actually going to be using the Windows subsystem for Linux. And so with the Windows subsystem for Linux, this is going to go in, it's going to essentially create a clone of a website. In this scenario, I'm going to show you the Blue Prism portal because I'm sure everybody on here, since a lot of you are RPA, are probably familiar with the portal account. It's going to actually clone that website. It's going to deploy it to a local web server. It's going to issue an SSL certificate. And then it's going to send out emails to a couple of different users that I have set up on it. And as those users get the emails, they're going to open it up. It's going to look very similar. And this is mainly simulating targeted attacks. So it's going to look very similar to some of the emails that you may have actually seen come from Blue Prism in the past month or so. So some of you may see that, some of you may not. And then it's just going to take them to that temporary web server that we have set up. And then it's going to do credential harvesting. And in an enterprise use case, the digital worker won't save the credentials. It's just going to say person A, B, and C all fell for it. Time to sign them up for some training. This first video I'm going to show, I'm just going to let it go through a little bit slowly and just talk to what it's doing, just so you can get an idea of what it's working on. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off, and I'll just talk through it as it's going. So if any of you have worked with Blue Prism before and seen some of our templates, so this is the best way that we're trying to adapt templates that we have available on our training portal. And so it's going to go in, it's going to do different work steps, like the startup steps of going in, loading the queue, getting your application started up. In this instance, it's supportsystem.com application that we commandeered for this use case. And then once it has all those queue items loaded, it's going to go through each of those devices and it's pulling all of those different applications that's on it. And it is querying OpenCVE. And then as you can see now, it's going in and it's creating a security ticket related to that CVE. So in this instance right here, we can see that the virtual machine that we were working with, and it also lists the versions of the application. It lists the name of device. So in this instance, it's giving the DNS hosting of each device. And it's going to give you a brief description and some information regarding the CVE that it has. And then it's going to keep going through, and then it's just going to cycle through all of these different applications and check it out. In the background, so from a technical perspective, it's not opening up many applications outside of the support system. But what it's doing is in the background, Jesse, like we talked about a little bit briefly earlier, is it's actually taking advantage of PowerShell. Using the template app objects that we have, it's programmatically accessing PowerShell. And it's running all of those commands, passing the credentials that it needs, creating a temporary credential in the PowerShell session that it has so that it's only temporarily able to run these queries. So that way, once it finishes, the permissions are no longer there. And yeah, so it just goes through it. It's pretty quick and it does all of these things. And so once it finishes going through all of the devices as well, it's just going to save a quick Excel report. Nothing fancy. Every company has their templates for things. The report at the end is just whatever you feel works best. But for now, it's just opening up, it's just putting all of the data with things like the machine, what's the software, what's the CVE, and then it's going to distribute it to your team members. Does anybody have any quick questions around how Blue Prism can be expanded to work with vulnerability management or any use cases similar to this?
One quick comment to Lisa Nates here. We are working to automatically deploy desktop software. Theoretically, you could actually check the CV for the recommended update and then deploy it. Basically, or you could literally package it using a few commands and then actually deploy it, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that we were thinking about. So we actually have an internal initiative to add in some additional use cases that are IT administration focused that kind of correspond with what these tools are doing too. So some of these might end up being joint. So we'll see over the next 2 years where that goes. But yeah, those are one of the things that we're actually working to is either going in and deploying it using maybe like an MSI file that is on hand and automatically deploying those updated patches, or leveraging something like, I know ServiceNow has a lot of capabilities to do that stuff. A lot of endpoint detection tools that built in now where you can force those patches through as well. So it's whatever use case or whatever tools that an organization has. We want to build templates that kind of work around whatever solution they have in place so that they can enhance it.
That's very interesting. There's a comment here how it can help with patch deployments. And I guess we walk through that a little bit, but I don't know.
Yes. So again, like for patch deployments, if there isn't any software built on the device, and that's actually the first use case that if you all are interested a month from now, we can regroup. I'll give everybody my email and we can show the progress on how that one's looking. But for patch deployments, the way that we were thinking we could leverage this is keeping track of all of the versions and all of the applications that an organization has, and then leveraging a repository, whether it be accessed via SFTP or network share. Just depends on the setup, and pooling those updated versions for the devices that are vulnerable and haven't had patch deploys yet, and actually leveraging some of those features that PowerShell makes available with a lot of the newer modules that they have, and forcing those installations on those devices and then forcing restarts through policy updates and stuff like that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Okay. I'm not sure, but we'll keep going. Yes, it did. Wonderful. And then David's got a question here. Where am I able to find a list of your data connectors?
We have our digital exchange that Blue Prism makes available to all of our customers. Any question?
Does your product support automation of centralized logging architecture?
Yes. So the product as a whole, a lot of these would still have to be built out on a custom case by case basis. These are just sample processes and sample actions and components within the Blue Prism that we're providing to get you started. Depending on what architecture you have in place, maybe use Azure or AWS for a lot of the cloud services. In a lot of cases, it would just be a case by case basis. Yeah. In the end, the sales pitch is RPA can do everything, but if you identify like what it would add the most value in, then I think it would just be a case by case basis on whether RPA would be the best solution for it.
Yeah, in our organization, we do actively download log files, and not for system data, but really for financial data, but it's the same thing actively. So we log into an enterprise app and then download Excel documents or dumps or reports, and we also access APIs, and then we also access the databases directly. And so there's a lot of different mechanisms to access data using RP. Yeah.
And with the use cases too, one of the things that we wanted to think about with Prism is, and this is probably more like government specific, is when you're accessing logs and data that require things like security clearances. If any of you are familiar with how long it could take to get permission from one compartmentalized area of government to another compartmentalized area of government, you could be 6 to 12 months waiting to get permissions just to check the logs for one specific thing. But RPA doesn't require a security clearance. It's not a person. So, those are all right. Thank you very much.
All right. We're We're back.
And then could you re-add me as a host real quick as well?
I sure can. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Let's,
I'm going to restart my screen share.
great.
And then I'm going to pop open this next video that we want to just do a quick overview of. So this next use case, and can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So this next use case is actually leveraging the Windows subsystem for Linux and a tool that comes with Kali Linux called SE Toolkit. So SE Toolkit, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's social engineering toolkit. It's used to replicate a lot of social engineering attacks, which are simulations that would target specific end users within an organization and try to trick them into giving you credentials and things like that. So this is SE Toolkit, something that's freely available online. It's an open source project, and it's very popular and widely used by security researchers and pen testers. So what you're going to see in this automation is it's going to go in, and Blue Prism is going to actually retrieve a quick list of users. So in this case, it's just going to be me. It's going to take that user, add it to a queue, and then it's also going to create a clone of the Blue Prism portal. And then it's going to send out a link to my email address. And then what you're going to see is me going in, reading the email, and then we're going to open it up and just see how we're able to drive that use case and drive this tool, which would otherwise be something that's handled manually. And we're able to drive this tool using RPA specifically to actually make it something that is scheduled, something that's running frequently, and that is able to target different user groups at different times in a very quick period of time. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and just let it start running. And I'm going to pause periodically just to show different things that are happening. So again, it's going through, opening up Windows subsystem for Linux. For those of you who have used Windows terminal before, it's just like PowerShell, but it's very quick. And so everything that it's doing is command line based. However, I am using the web interface for this one specifically because it's a demo. I want to make it look fun. And so we're going to leverage Blue Prism's going to leverage the site cloner tool that SE Toolkit makes available. We're going to provide a local IP address to use. We're going to provide a URL for the page that we want to clone. In this instance, it's going to be the user login page. And then it's going to send a link to all of the users that you have listed. And so now we can see it went in and sent the link, and it just finished creating that campaign. And so now what I'm doing right now is I'm here in my inbox. As you can see, most recent email from Jesse. And then the next one is going to be from this digital worker. I'm going to pause my screen first and see if anybody can see from this email what is off, other than a vast footer in this email. Does anything look off from what you would expect to see from Blue Prism in an email?
The email address. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. A big thing hackers are doing is for $1 in the form of some different cryptocurrency, it's very easy to now anonymously purchase domains and actually get it secretly using a hosting provider in somewhere like Switzerland or other parts of the world that don't keep track of that data. And then they use that to actually target specific areas within an organization. And so this simulation right here is actually targeting people that are using Blue Prism. And then my next question is, has anybody seen this email before? So everybody that, is part of the Blue Prism portal that receives updates around our product updates and announcements, this was actually one of the emails that was sent out previously to everybody that is a Blue Prism customer or Blue Prism partner. And so this is just, again, a clone of that email with some slight changes into it to try and really trick the users. And so the goal of that is just to make sure users are always checking for the little things, like maybe a footer's changed, maybe the URL has like a letter off or something like that. And so I'm going to let it keep going. And as you can see, pretty quick. The next thing that a user would have to go in and check, and that most people don't do, is that those hyperlinks. So typically this would be a link to a Blue Prism portal page, but in this instance, it's localhost, or in a larger simulation, it would be something like portal.blueprism.com, just to simulate how users can recreate those different items. And so once it opens it up, so the tool that we used, SE Toolkit, does a very good job of cloning those websites. So, essentially to the point where it's even able to pull in the cookie pop-ups, asking what are your preferences for cookies. And so part of these simulations is, one, did the users actually access the page? And so as we can see, me as the test subject for this use case, I access the page, I open it up, and I'm just going to start clicking through it. And I'm going to act like I'm trying to log into it. So I'm going to accept all of the cookies. I'm going to put in a username and password. Well, name of the company that was on me. And so once the tool that we're leveraging, once it goes in and it does its thing, then it redirects you. Another very common tactic that's used that a lot of end users always fall for. And so this simulation is trying to replicate, again, some of those tactics that happen. And so now we're going to look at what the digital worker sees. So our digital worker is seeing possible parameters. Again, it's creating these clones of the websites ad hoc. So it's not going to have a permanent website, or it's not going to have a static website that it's always cloning. It's going to change every time. And then it's going to identify the different fields that are within the form. So in this instance, we see two parameters. We see the username field, which is brady.cusack@blueprism.com. And then we also see the possible password field. And so you can see that I put in password 1 as my password. Obviously, that's not my password. I wouldn't share it publicly, but it pulls in those passwords that users might have accidentally put into it. From a digital worker perspective, we don't want the digital worker to read it and keep all of the passwords, but we do want to see that, hey, they put in the parameter of their email address. So somebody fell for this phishing campaign. And yeah, it's very robust. From here, once we actually have all of these things brought in, once it's actually gone through, it started these campaigns, you can just let it run. So the digital worker can move on to doing other tasks and just let this run in the background. It doesn't need to go in and every 5 minutes update it. You can leave this campaign running for a week. And then whatever your organization decides to do after that, whether it be go through and assign training to everybody, go through and lock people out of their accounts because they fell for it. So does anybody have any questions regarding how Blue Prism can simulate these types of use cases, or how it can actually work with the Windows subsystem for Linux and these tools in general?
This one's obviously a great mechanism to test.
Yes.
Clearly email's one of the biggest ways to actually collect this kind of data. And so, it makes great sense to do it.
The biggest vulnerability in any organization cybersecurity infrastructure it's almost never the technology. It's almost always the people falling for these types of phishing attacks. So yeah, it falls on that. You always need to train people, always need to just get them used to checking it, because if you keep them looking at it and they keep falling for the same tricks, then they have to keep going through the training. And then eventually they're like, oh gosh, I don't want to have to do that training again. So I guess I should read the email now.
Yeah. It's really great for social engineering.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. I was really excited to present this again to everybody on the call. If nobody has any questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my email in the chat here, where you can also see it captured by SE Toolkit. And then if anybody on the call has any questions, any use cases that you want to explore, I don't have a life, so I have a ton of time to make these things out, and I have a blast doing it. So if anybody has use cases that you'd be interested in seeing demoed out for your organization, or just because you think it's cool, please send me an email, because I would love to build it, because I'd love nothing more to build it because it's so much fun.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Brady. Interesting use cases that spurred a few ideas in my mind as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.